Hi, everybody. This is Silvio Canto in Dallas, Texas on Monday, January the 13th. And as we like to do on Mondays, we'll be chatting today with our friend Bill Katz, the editor of Urgent Agenda. Bill, welcome. A week before we have a new president. That's pretty interesting.
Yeah, it sure is. We've all of us of a certain age have been here before,
Yeah.
waiting for the inauguration, and going back over history, we should note that it is only since 1936 that the president is inaugurated on January 20th. It used to be March 4th.
Right.
And the reason for it being March 4th, so long after the election, was that in the olden days, before General Motors, there was horses and buggies, and it took
Right.
a long time to get to Washington. So it's now January 20th. We hope everything goes well, and that a week from now, Donald Trump will be president of the United States. And I would imagine that he will immediately go back to the White House and start signing executive orders, one right after the other, pretty much
And
reversing the Biden years.
and then and then they'll go dancing after that. There'll be that great dancing of the president and the first lady, that big party that they have, the big
Yes,
ball or whatever they
the
call it.
inaugural ball. I
You
don't
know,
know. I don't know if there's going to be an inaugural ball as such. Doesn't he have a rally or a big event somewhere in Washington where he
well,
brings in thousands of his
right.
guests?
Well, I thought
He
this
he
was the day before, wasn't it?
maybe it was the day
Yeah,
before. There's so much going on, and I imagine an enormous amount is going on behind the scenes because we know that Trump is heavily involved in the Middle East negotiations,
right.
which may result in some kind of an agreement by January 20th, because he himself has said if our hostages are not returned by January 20th, then all hell will break loose.
Right.
And I think that when he speaks, it's taken seriously.
Well, when he says something like that, I think people realize he means it.
Yes.
You know, it's not like Obama drawing a red line in Syria and then forgetting about it. That
Yes.
doesn't happen with Trump.
No.
Now, the Middle East deal, Bill, this is, as you say, something being worked on at the moment. But what do you see? I mean, what are some of the elements of the deal? I would assume the hostages and the Israelis pulling out. Is that about it?
We're getting conflicting information on what it actually consists of. I know that there are some people in Israel who are dead against it. Others think it's a good idea. Apparently, it is a deal that would produce an immediate ceasefire and a return of some hostages on January 20th of this year. Then I think there's a second phase. At least that's what we're being told. Now, what Trump has said is all the hostages must be returned on January 20th, and there'll be a ceasefire, and the war will essentially be over. We're not sure which one is being considered. We know that a final agreement has been, from our viewpoint, has been drawn up by the United States and Israel, has been approved by Israel, completely approved by Israel, and is now in the hands of Hamas. And Hamas will either say yes or no.
Well, of course, the question with Hamas is, where is Hamas? What is Hamas? I mean,
Yes,
I mean, when you tell me that Israel has approved it, well, then that, I'm thinking of that. Well, they had a meeting and a cabinet meeting, I guess,
I,
and
th-
they discussed it and approved it. I don't know where Hamas. What are they doing? Like this guy over here
I,
is sending a message to this guy over here because they don't talk by phone anymore
I
or
have heard.
Teams.
I have heard from a very informed source that
Okay,
they're giving the whole thing to Federal Express, and they're going
okay,
to find Hamas and
right.
deliver it.
Deliver it just on time. Maybe Elon Musk will turn on that Starlink that he
Yes.
has, and that way they can all communicate safely. Because if I'm a member of Hamas, I would not open a phone.
No, yes, the phone will explode,
Yes,
and and somebody will sing "Happy Birthday."
that's right. Yeah. So I mean, if I'm a member, I'm one of those people. I don't mess with laptops or with phones. I'm back to sending a bird. Tying something to the bird's feet and having the bird fly to the next cave. because this is well. I hope, in all seriousness, I hope they do get a deal. It is. You were talking about previous inaugurations. It is reminiscent of '81 when the deal, I guess, happened just as after President Carter left the presidency. And I'll never forget that day, President Reagan, just newly elected or inaugurated, making the statement that the hostages were on their way out.
Yes.
And that was pretty humiliating for Carter because they went out of their way to wait until after. They may do the same thing to Biden. I don't know. I hope not, but because I just want the hostages out.
Yeah.
But I don't know.
They basically humiliated Carter in a way because it took Reagan to get them out, and there have been all kinds of stories and theories that Reagan was in direct contact with the Iranians.
Right.
But we don't know.
Yeah, that was in fact, that I think even Bush was involved in that, as I recall. All kinds of stories that Bush may have been also involved. I just remember all of that. It was never proven. But the good thing is that there's two good things that happened. The hostages got out and Reagan got in.
Yes.
And everything else after that, I'm not going to worry too much about it. But yes, I hope it happens. I really do.
Yes.
Because there are some families who have not seen their relatives for all this time. And, I hope they're okay, the hostages. That's the other thing that worries me.
We don't even know that. Now, presumably, the Hamas people have been given I think it is called a proof of life statement to make on each individual hostage, where they have to certify that the hostage is alive and provide proof of it. So, but we're only being told certain things, and we're kind of being theoretical now because the whole thing can fall apart. All Hamas has to say is no. And take its chances, and then you're going to find a lot of Hamas leaders disappearing very quickly.
That's right. Yeah, they will be gone. I mean, where are they? I don't know. Have you seen Mohammed? No, we haven't seen him in a few weeks.
No. I thought he was in Los Angeles.
That's right. Yeah, we haven't seen him in a while. Yeah, he may be in LA. That's what they tell me. Maybe he went to check on his house.
Yeah,
LA or something like that. But yeah, well, I hope it happens. I hope the deal happens for the sake, if nothing else, for the sake of the families.
Yes, absolutely.
I mean, the families, they've been put through really unbelievable hell here for the last, a year and October 7th, so a year and almost 3 months. Terrible. Absolutely terrible.
That's true.
Yeah.
Well, and under terrible conditions.
Yes.
So we'll
see. We hope it happens.
Yes.
We hope it happens, and I know you'll keep us posted at Urgent Agenda as developments happen. Well, the big story in the country, of course, is the LA fires. And Bill, let me say this. I get a kick out of these Democrats who are saying that Trump is politicizing or Republicans are politicizing this. And I get a kick out of it because, when Uvalde happened, remember the terrible incident here in Texas with the kids at that school?
Sure.
Even before the ambulances got to the school to check on, pick up all the dead bodies and all the injured kids, they were already on TV blaming it on Governor Abbott.
Yes, of course.
And Beto O'Rourke was making a fool out of himself, breaking into a press conference. So they have no problem politicizing things. And now all of a sudden, my gosh, don't you dare politicize the fires. I'm not trying to politicize it. I just want a conversation of what happened, Bill.
Yes, that's right. That's right. Oh, no, the Democrats have apparently not learned any lessons from the election, and that they have, at least according to one news report last night, the Democratic National Committee has already made a highly political statement that the country is going to be ruined, and that they will stand in the way and make sure that Trump does not get his program through. Apparently, they don't realize there was an election.
Right.
And if they do realize that, they didn't learn anything from it, and maybe they don't want to learn anything from it. Maybe they're the kind of people in charge of the party today who would rather go down fighting.
Well, they also apparently have not heard that there was a fire in
Yes.
LA that has nothing to do with the election. A fire where a lot of people lost their homes, including probably a lot of Democrats who lost their homes. And, you know, I think, Bill, when you see what's happening in New York City and Washington, D.C., Baltimore, I can go through the whole list of Philadelphia, Milwaukee, the whole list of cities that are just basically not being governed very well.
No.
In fact, very poorly. And then you have this situation in LA where, yeah, there's climate change. Yes, I know there's a lot of wind. And yes, I know that there are fires out there. But they could have done a much better job of preparing for this. They could have been more ready for this. They knew that it was going to happen eventually.
Yeah.
So, I mean, nobody was ready. It seems like even the fire hydrants don't have any water.
Yes.
I mean, it seems to me the very least you can expect out of a local government is that when the fire truck shows up and turns on the fire hydrant, that they get water. Bill.
Well, that was explained by one of the fire officials, if there are fire officials, that it was not the fire hydrants, it was the power grid that failed, and that to operate the pumps that pump water into the system, you have to have electricity, and the electricity went out, and they had to do something else, but clearly they were not prepared for something of size. They were prepared for an occasional brush fire here and an occasional brush fire there. The mayor was given specific warning before she left for Ghana, I believe, that that there could be a very, very serious fire situation while she was gone. And she apparently didn't care or felt that she was in contact or had a telephone or an iPhone or a something phone. And while she was in the air, this whole thing broke, and it
Right.
took her a long time to get back. And
It sure
and
did.
and she did not really have control. And then you have other officials, the governor of the state. I think he needs a Newsom a television lesson on how to look interested.
Right.
At least look interested, even if you're not interested. Look interested.
Right.
And he did not seem to know what he was doing or why he even should be doing it. Local officials, fire officials, were giving out bad information. They were completely unprepared for something that they were warned about. Now, we learned that the federal government had warned Los Angeles about the probability of a major disaster at some point, unless they did certain things to the ground, cleaned up certain things. Nothing was done. And it took them, and also when they called up the National Guard, it took them 2 or 3 days to do it. When you need the National Guard, you need them in an hour. That's
Right.
why we have a National Guard. That it's
That's right.
it's local. They just
That's
they
right.
just make a phone call and they're there. But the lack of preparation and the fact that it took day after day to finally get things going is totally unacceptable. Now,
Yes.
but
I,
but I don't see any indication that the mayor is going to resign in disgrace.
no, no, I don't see one. I don't see that either. I'm sure she says she's going to fight all the, everybody and keep her job. But I had not heard, by the way, your explanation of the fire hydrants was new to me. I had not
Mhm.
heard that it was the power grid that did that. But let's assume that it was. Well, if your fire hydrants depend on the power grid, shouldn't you have some backups
Of
or
course.
generators? I mean, I'll give you an example, Bill. When we had our terrible, absolutely horrible winter freeze almost 4 years ago, we had a breakdown in the power grid and the electricity, but that didn't impact the hospitals because all the hospitals had backup equipment that they could rely on. So nobody at the hospital was impacted. They got electricity like normally because they had all kinds of backups in the event of a collapse in the power grid. So I would think that if I'm the fire chief or the mayor, one of the first questions I would ask in my inventory of questions would be, okay, is the power grid okay to support the fire hydrants? Because to me, I mean, if it is, I mean, if that's the case that the power grid broke down, then my goodness, haven't they heard of batteries or generators that can step
Yes.
in? that's what I don't get. I mean, that comes back again to the lack of preparation, Bill.
Yes, there were even stories, I can't confirm them, that some of the spare lithium batteries that they need for a disaster like this were exploding. Now, I can't confirm that, but it sounds right because they've been exploding everywhere else. They just didn't. They just didn't seem to care, and they had, what was it, a special meeting uh, uh, during this period of the state legislature, not to handle the crisis, but to prepare for the advent of Donald Trump, that
Right.
they were going to come up with strategies to block Donald Trump. I mean, these people are living in an alternative universe. They really are.
Yeah. They
They,
wanted to get the resistance underway.
yes, we got to get the resistance underway. We don't have any water to give them,
Right.
but we'll get the resistance
Right.
underway.
Yeah, we'll get the resistance underway because stopping Trump is even more important than
Yes,
letting your city burn. Yeah.
that's right.
No,
And
it's
now
just that. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
that's right. Now we're told that from now until Wednesday is the most critical period, that they expect that the winds will start again, the Santa Ana winds, that they will blow in a direction that will expand the fire and wipe out any progress they've made so far. We hope that doesn't happen, of
No.
course.
No, we hope. And there's a lot of, I mean, there's a lot of very famous places there in LA that I fear could burn down. I mean,
Yes.
how close is Hollywood to any of this? All the studios and all those collections of films and everything else. I mean, I don't know, but
I'd imagine that the film collections are pretty much digitized by this time, but I'm not sure. I'm simply assuming it. But the Hollywood studios, they're in that area. I don't
mhm,
know if any of them have been directly touched, but the people who work in Hollywood, who work in the studios, they live in those areas, and
right,
I'm sure many of them have had to evacuate. I don't know how you get a film crew together
right,
to just do anything right now. I would imagine that the phone lines are burning between other states and state capitals and the film industry and the unions in Hollywood saying, "Come here, we can set you up and set you up within a few days."
yeah.
But Hollywood can be destroyed by this. They may not be able to rebuild the areas that are out in time to prevent people from and companies from leaving Hollywood.
Well, there's also, Bill, the just the personal homes that have
Yes,
gone down without insurance. And even if you had insurance, that was still going to take a tremendous toll on the insurance industry to pay those claims. But many of those people do not have insurance, so I expect there's going to be an exodus of people from
I
California.
think
Many
you're right.
people will just say, you know what, we don't have a house, we don't have any money. I can work from my laptop in Nevada or in Wyoming. Let's go, and at least we can start there again. Uh, because I mean, it's going to take a long time to rebuild any of this. Remember Katrina, how long it took to rebuild that city, and there they had a lot of support from the federal government. I'm not
Yes.
sure how much they're going to get here without conditions.
Oh,
I
there have to
mean,
be conditions because when they're talking about numbers that are so large, like
yes,
$400 billion. I mean, we could rebuild most of the Pacific Fleet, I think, with that kind of money. And I'm sure that the Republicans in particular are going to demand a lot of backup. That the insurance companies are going to have to go to other sources. I think this has happened in Britain, where Lloyd's of London ran out of money because of a crisis in the late in the recent century, and they had to go to all kinds of services to get money simply to pay its loans. It's policyholders. The
right,
policyholders haven't even yet uh, submitted their claims. Those claims can go way beyond $400 billion.
right. Well, they probably will because that's just the way it usually is. But a really good friend of mine at church is an insurance agent, the
Hmm.
casualty insurance agent, home
Hmm.
insurance, that kind of thing. And when I don't want to mention their name, but one
Of
of the
course
major
not.
companies, decided to pull out. I asked my friend, what's that all about? And he says, well, they don't think that the city, and this was almost 6 months ago when this
Yes.
happened. He told me that the company doesn't think that the city is ready, that they've taken the precautions. So it's like you're insuring something. It's like insuring an airplane where you're not sure the airplane can fly.
Exactly.
So what
Yes.
insurance company is going to do that? They're not going to do that.
Now, as
Uh,
I oh, go ahead.
no, and so I think that the insurance companies got out because they saw this coming,
Yes.
and they said we don't want to, we cannot afford. I mean, $400 billion. What kind of money is that?
Yes.
So I just think that there's so much irresponsibility here. What now? Speaking of the governor, I don't know if you saw this. They had him on television, and he said we have a Marshall Plan, I think, for California. So the interviewer said, "Okay, but what's the plan?"
Yeah.
And he said, "Well, we have a name. We don't have a plan yet."
Yes.
Or something like that he said. Um, but I would think that if President Trump could actually benefit politically if he comes in and cleans this up. But
Yes.
I would assume that they'll lay down certain conditions. For example, you can do away with sanctuary cities.
Yes.
That has
I
to go.
Yes, I don't know. I don't know what powers the president has in this area without the consent of Congress,
Well, sure.
and they're going to try to block. The Democrats will try to block everything, and they're going to pull the race card. We all know that, or they've already done it. And also, I had heard and assumed that within the insurance industry there was an emergency pool, that if a company went bankrupt, the other companies had a pool of money ready to come in and save that company. I have not heard anything about that here, and I would imagine if they do have a pool, it is far smaller than anything that's going to be required.
Well, that is true. For example, in Texas, I'm not sure about the casualty companies, but the life companies,
Yes.
there is that pool.
Yes.
That because it's kind of self-serving. The companies don't want a company to go under because they don't want to screw the policyholders. So what happens is if the company that you have a policy with goes under, another company steps in and takes over that policy. And basically you now have, if you were with XYZ company, you're now with ABC company, but you as a policyholder don't lose anything.
Right.
And so that does exist. And I remember when we had our winter freeze 4 years ago, that many electric, because in Texas you buy electricity you don't buy it from the power plant or the power company. You buy it from individual companies that exist in the state. So if you bought a policy, let's say from ABC Electric Company, and that company went out, another company would step in. And that is in fact what happened. You had all kinds of people, you kept the same coverage you had, and other companies basically took over. And that does exist in the insurance industry. But the problem here is we're talking about such amounts of money.
Yes.
Then you're right. I don't think there is a company in the country that could write a check for $400 billion.
Not possible.
It's simply impossible. Now they also, as I understand, Bill, one quick thing here, as I understand, in California, they do have some kind of a insurance carrier run by the state.
Yes. And in fact, the governor was on saying that his father, who owns a home in California, has that policy. He said it doesn't begin to cover the losses. It's basically a minimal policy. They're not prepared for anything, and this is it's going to take the federal government. The federal government almost has to bail out Los Angeles because you cannot have a city that size fail.
Right.
I mean, where do people go? Who provides the services? And the government will probably have to loan a certain amount of money, but who's going to pay back the loan? It's so irresponsible in California. They may say, well, we can't pay it back. What are you going to do? Kill our people?
Right.
Just because they're not billionaires? You saw the statement yesterday by the Democratic National Committee that the only people that we are not going to pay for billionaires to rebuild their homes. I mean, always the assumption that everybody who lost money was a billionaire.
Well, a lot of them are Democrats. I hope they.
Yes,
that's the funny part about all of this. I was watching a little video of all of the people who lost homes, and I saw something interesting about all these videos. I mean, the faces and the names. All of a sudden, I'm saying, wait a minute, didn't she endorse Kamala Harris? Didn't
Yes.
he endorse? I mean, so look, I mean, look, this is a terrible thing. We don't wish it on anybody, but I think Trump could actually gain politically out of all of this.
Oh, he can. He
But
can.
it's going to take. This is going to be one of those enterprises that will require a lot of cash. And man, I don't know where it's going to come from.
Well, I think, it's going to take months just to set this up, just to set up what is being done. The point was made is Trump will become president next Monday. If the federal government is involved, it's Trump that is involved.
Right.
You can see a special session of the California legislature being called and saying Trump is not a legitimate president.
Right. Yeah, Trump is not legitimate. He's a dictator, but he's going to talk to us about how he's going to bail out the state of California.
Yes, and he's a convicted felon.
But he's going to take us out of this mess by giving us $100 billion.
Yeah,
something. Yeah.
Well,
no, I mean, it's just absolutely. It's really sad, really, when you think about it, because it didn't have to happen.
And this could be the end of the Democratic Party.
Well, and that's the point I wanted to ask you next, Bill, because I do think that the Democrat model of governing, whether it's New York City, whether it's Baltimore, Philadelphia, although I think Philadelphia is changing a little bit. They have a different mayor now. But certainly the Windy City of Chicago, what a disaster that is.
Yes.
San Francisco, LA, I mean, they're just collapsing. They're just collapsing. They don't have any ideas except to talk about race or to talk about whatever. And at some point, you gotta solve people's problems. And something as basic as a fire hydrant, if a fire hydrant is not running, that's pretty basic, Bill.
Well, yes, and if the Democrats become completely crazy, I imagine that under the Constitution, the president can move in and with troops and have the federal government run California for a while. But I'm not sure of that. But somebody has to run something.
Well, I'm sure that President Trump will say, like Abraham Lincoln did.
Yes, that's right.
I'm going to take over California, and you know what? That might actually be popular in California.
It might be. They may go to the government. What's interesting here also, as a side issue, is that President Trump is a builder. He made his fortunes in building.
Yeah, right.
He knows all about construction. And you've got a real expert who's going to get on to the people of the United States. Who do you trust on this? A man who built a construction empire?
Right.
Or Gavin Newsom?
Right. Yeah. Who should be doing, Gavin Newsom should be doing Brill cream commercials. Remember those?
That's right. Yes.
Brill cream commercials.
And he'll probably say something like that.
Right. Yeah.
They'll send him a case of Brill cream.
That's right. But it is so remarkable, and it's still going on. That's the part that amazes me. Like you mentioned before about these very heavy winds and the fires. I mean, they've got all these airplanes dropping water, but I mean, that's good intentions. But what they really need is for the fire hydrants. That's what they were designed for.
Yes.
I mean, how many of these fires could have been stopped right away, just simply with a little water out of the fire hydrant? It is just absolutely incredible. But my goodness, what a mess! What a mess! Poor Newsom. He probably thought that he was getting himself all set up for 2028. I think after this, I hate to use the example like this, but I think he went in flames too.
Yes, I'm afraid.
He went up. Yeah, I don't see.
Well, you can't see him running for president. I mean, on the basis of what?
Yeah, I'm the guy who gave you the LA fires. Vote for me.
That's right.
That's absolutely incredible.
And I think also I cannot see how the mayor of Los Angeles can survive.
Yeah, I mean, look, they can send her to Cuba, and she can visit Raul Castro, who's in bad health.
Yes,
and kind of reminisce about the good old days of socialism. But yeah, she's in deep trouble, really. But I don't know what the process is out there, because there is no opposition party.
Yes,
I
that's
mean,
right. Well, that's exactly right. It's a one-party state.
it's a one-party state. So all you hope for is that you have a press, news media that will do their work. I don't know. I haven't really been tracking it. How do you think they're covering this, Bill?
I think the press has done as decent a job as they are capable of
Okay.
doing. I think they probably don't know that much about the subject, but I think the on-the-scene reporters have tried to do a very decent job. I don't see any real attempt to cover for officials. Maybe there are things they're not mentioning that they don't want to mention because they feel a certain loyalty to the government of California, which, after all, is involved with providing facilities for the press. But I think I can't say I have any
Okay.
great any great problems, except that some of the reporters are really not well trained in basic journalism. They, for example, they come into the story in the middle. They don't give you basic information, but they do give you the information that they have.
Right.
I,
Well,
I,
it's interesting, but one more thing I wanted to say about LA, Bill. Let's say you and I are members of the Special Olympic Committee, not the Special Olympic Committee, but the regular Olympics. And we're sitting there talking about the fact that the Olympics are going to be held in this town in what, a year
yeah,
and a half,
yeah, I think it's 2 years.
whatever it
But
is. I think
maybe
it's
it
20.
be
I
maybe
think
less.
20, let's see, 14, 18, 22. No, it's 20. It's 26, I
Yes.
believe. Or no, wait a minute. Well, anyway, it's either 26 or 28. But that, what just happened in LA cannot be very inspiring. This could have
No.
happened, by the way, in the middle of the Olympics.
Yes.
And
Absolutely.
imagine the chaos that would have been with
The
thousands of
Olympics.
tourists.
Yes, the Olympics. First of all, they have to have facilities,
Right,
which I think a lot of the facilities that they need, in addition to the stadium, they need hotels. They need
right.
all kinds of power. They need roads. But I mean, they build an Olympic village for those purposes. And who wants to build anything in San Francisco? I think there's a possibility they may lose the Olympics.
Well, I mean, that's not a bad idea when you
No.
consider the situation. But I can just imagine the Olympic Committee, wherever they are, sends a maintenance person to LA to check on things, and then files a report saying, "Well, the fire hydrants, we can't get any water out of the fire hydrants, and how can we have an Olympic if the fire hydrants don't work?" And I mean, even before, because they check everything when they do these Olympics, they check all the little things in the infrastructure of the city,
Yes.
and so much of this city is just failing. I mean, it's sad. It's something. I think we're going to be talking about this for a while, Bill.
Oh, I think this is going to be one of those semi-permanent stories for
Yes,
years and years.
for years and years to come. And look at Katrina. I mean, Katrina took what, 2005 when it happened, and they were still talking about it a couple of years
Three,
later.
4 years later.
That's right.
And
And that was
remember,
a much smaller situation.
we're talking about the land that has been burned. We have a coastline in California that is enormously long. Uh, is there a national security threat? For example, submarines of a foreign country, especially China, could move in and do some damage during this period? Are we defended at sea? Uh, I, this immediately becomes a national security issue.
Which is why I think you may be exactly right that Trump may be at some point, especially if he senses that California is not cooperating with him, he may just say, use whatever powers, and I'm sure the president has special powers that he can use to do something like that, and basically take over. I mean, he can take over the National Guard of the
Yes,
state,
he can do
so
that.
he can do. So we'll just keep going on this. But if I could go to the other side of the country, New York, the much anticipated conviction of Donald Trump happened.
Yes.
And I'm sitting there going, wait a minute, you mean we spent 6 months, spent $25 million, and this is what we got?
Yes, we have a convicted felon with no punishment.
That's right.
But he's a
What I think a lot of kids in the country would like to have their parents convict them like that. or punish them like that.
Yes.
Gee, everything you did was wrong, but there's no punishment.
Yes, and also the conviction can be overturned. They haven't even begun the appeals process.
Yes. I was watching this lady on I forgot the show or the lady's name, but they were asking her if this could be overturned, and she said probably it will be.
Yes,
But this case should have never been brought to
of
trial. That's what
course,
she said.
of course.
And she said it's a sad day for New York. I think Jonathan Turley was saying the same thing, that it's a really sad day for New York that we're even doing this. I mean, the judge looked so ridiculous sitting there, doing it the way he did it. And even this convicted felon stuff, Bill, I mean, does that really work anymore? Is that like he's Hitler and he's a racist? Does that stuff even work? It certainly didn't work in the elections.
Well, yes. I mean, you look at we've said this before. You look at the last year, and if it was presented as a novel to a publishing house, they turn
Right,
it down and say this could never happen, and
right,
this is now happening into the new year.
right. And it's
Uh,
probably going to get better. I mean,
yes,
I hate to say better because it means more dramatic, but
yes.
it's just I just have this funny feeling that Trump's second term is going to be for the ages. That it's going to be a history teacher's delight.
Yes,
A
yes,
historian's delight. When
yes.
he's finished in these 4 years, it's going to be a historian's delight because everything that could possibly happen will happen. Let me go to another topic. This one is foreign policy again. Trump and Greenland and Panama. I'm old enough to remember the Panama Canal when that was turned over to Panama. And I remember all the debates, Bill, and the debates were always very clear that we had a national security interest in the canal and that Panama was supposed to run it correctly. Now, I'm not saying they're running it incorrectly, but there's too much China, as far as I'm concerned, in that canal. And that's what worries me more than anything else. China is now apparently 2 Chinese companies are running the entrance and the exit of the canal, from what I understand. You have the Chinese are building a massive port in Peru so that facilitate trade, but probably so that their big military ships can stop in for provisions. And it just worries me. And I think that's what Trump is doing here. He's really talking about China. It's not so much Panama or Greenland. He's talking about China. That's where I see it, Bill.
Well, that's exactly right, and it was made clear to us in recent days, discussing the end of the Biden administration, that the world is much more dangerous today than it was 4 years ago when President Trump left office. And we have not only enemies, we have enemies who have joined with each other. Russia and China are working much closer together. In the Middle East, we have Iran working with North Korea, actually using North Korean troops. We have situations in the Middle East that are quite dependent on these groups of countries that have now come together. We have Ukraine, which is in considerable difficulty, and they're trying to get some kind of an agreement to stop that war, which is savage. It's a savage conflict where hundreds of thousands of people are being killed. So all over the world, we are in trouble because the United States, as the leading nation, has to lead. It hasn't been doing much leading recently, but Trump will lead.
Yeah, well, and I think you can smell that in the air already. You can, and again, it reminds me a little bit of when Reagan came in. There was a sense like, okay, Reagan is in, things are going to be cool now, because there was almost the same feeling about President Biden now back then about President Carter, what you now have about President Biden. Now, I think different situations. I understand. I think Biden has done worse things than Carter did, but there was a sense with President Carter that he didn't know what he was up to, and you certainly have that feeling with Biden. So I cannot wait until next Tuesday at noon when you and I can talk and we can actually talk about President Trump, I guess, dancing or signing executive orders. I think you were telling me before we started the podcast that you expecting to sign a bunch of executive orders. Me too. Me too. I think you'll be the entire afternoon. He'll be signing and signing this and signing that. And people usually in the incoming administration, they tell their wife to go out and get a dress for the big dance. I think that in this administration, they're going to tell their wife, I may not come home for dinner tonight because I may be working really late at the White House.
Oh, yes, yes. Look, we still do not have a complete picture of what is happening. Even the California government says we haven't been able to check everything. And I'm sure the intended officers of the Treasury Department are heavily involved. The Treasury, and we don't. As of Monday, we will not have a Secretary of the Treasury because he has not been confirmed. I hope the Democrats will act responsibly. I don't think we can guarantee it.
Well, the
And a
Secretary
few,
of Treasury
and
is a pretty
yeah,
good candidate. I mean,
yes,
the one that's, I mean, I can understand Kennedy or Tulsi Gabbard. I can understand controversy there. But most of the selections that he's made are pretty good people.
yeah.
And I think they got to get Rubio going. They have to get the Secretary of Treasury going, Secretary of Defense going, whatever we may think of him. But those people have to be on the job as soon as possible because Trump's going to need him. The country's going to need it.
That's exactly right. You mentioned that this country could be attacked during this period
Yes.
very successfully. Not necessarily, well, I think we mentioned this before on our own shores, but certainly in places where we have considerable interest and military interest. And
Right.
speaking of military interest, may I point out that the shoreline of California is something I brought it up before. I'll bring it up again. Is something that is pretty exposed.
Yes, that's right. Well, there's people showing up in boats
Exactly
coming
right.
into the country, so it's not a
Yes.
big secret. But one last thing I wanted to say, Bill, one fear that I have, and I hope I'm not putting any ideas in anybody's head, but one fear that I have is when you have fires like that out of control, many of these metropolitan areas have like gas tanks where they reserve all this gas for domestic use or whatever,
Yes. Hmm.
or residential use or business use. And
That's
I'm
the
just sitting, I'm sitting here saying, my gosh, is anybody? I mean, is anybody protecting these gas tanks? Or
yes. That's the
can you? But can you
petroleum
imagine
reserve.
the damage that there could be if one of these tanks blew
Yes.
up?
Well, that's the petroleum reserve. We very rarely use it, but we have used it in peacetime to stabilize prices and to do other things. We used it in the 70s. We used it, I think, recently. I hope they're on the ball. Remember, and that a few years ago, a Chinese air balloon flew over the United States
Right.
and photographing our bases, and it took us a while to realize it was there, and then
Yeah.
whatever the information they got, I'm sure it was already transmitted to China by the
Right.
time the federal government decided what to do.
Well, they for a while there, the federal government thought that this was some kid somewhere who had put a balloon up in the air when it
Yes.
was a Chinese balloon, a major serious threat. But I'm just sitting there saying how horrible this is in LA, not just from a personal standpoint. I understand there's like 25 people already dead. There could be more, I suppose. And then the impact, respiratory impact on people. I mean, you could have some real health issues coming out of this. The stuff that people are smelling. I have an old high school friend who lives out there, and as I remember, he was having some respiratory problems, and I've not been able to get in touch with him. But that's the kind of thing that worries me, that you could have all these collateral problems, all these health issues. Even though you're not close to the fire, the smell is out there, Bill.
Oh, absolutely. Well, it's been told to us and told to the people that the quality of the air can be more dangerous than the fires themselves
Right.
because of all the toxic materials that are in the air and will be in the air. They make the point that there is still no rain out there, and the land is completely dry. The land is now filled with toxic elements that can really cause terrible problems. They expect medical issues to last at least 9 months. And again, I don't know what preparations have been made.
Well, and that's another issue too. That could cost billions of dollars too. All the healthcare costs related to that. I mean, it's just horrible, absolutely horrible.
Yeah,
And I don't want to politicize it, but some people didn't do their job. I'll just put
yeah.
it that way. Some people didn't do their job. Well, Bill, thank you so much for joining us today. Have a great rest of the week, and I hope they make a deal in the Middle East.
Sure.
And I hope that a week from today, when we chat, everything is smooth in the country, and we have a new president and a new vice president elect, and nothing to worry about.
Well,
Well,
I hope. I'm so glad that you're optimistic. I think we all have to be optimistic. We know we will have a better president and a better vice president, and we should be optimistic. And I think if the country had to pull together on this, in many ways they will.
yeah, I hope so. And I think this may be a trivia question, but this may be the first time that a president has actually been inaugurated on Martin Luther King's Day.
That's yes.
I think
I
that
think it is.
might be a trivia question because his birthday is actually on the 15th. Formally, that's
Yes,
what it is. He was born on the
yes.
15th, but they always celebrate this thing on a Monday. They could have done it today, but they celebrate it on a Monday,
I think
which
there was
happens
what
to
there
be
was.
inauguration day.
I think it was one previous time. I think it was 2004. But again, unless I check it, I can't say it
Yeah.
for sure.
Well, good idea for a Trivial Pursuit question
Yeah.
when they put that game together. Bill, as always, thank you so much for your time and have a great day.
Thank you, Silvio. Same to you.
And we'll see you the next time.
Absolutely.
All right. Our good friend, Bill Katz, the editor of Urgent Agenda. We talk about a few things, the deal in the Middle East that I hope happens, the absolutely devastating situation in Southern California, really more specifically LA, and all the other issues as well that we got into. It's just going to be a very difficult time for the people out there. I have many friends out there who I stay in touch with. I have not been able to actually talk to them, but several people are putting on Facebook that they're okay, which I'm happy to see that. Well, have a great day. This is Silvio Canto in Dallas, and we'll talk to you later. Bye-bye, everybody.